I think we can all agree that that is one of the essential elements that we will have to collectively deal with. Otherwise, this will become one of the biggest divides of this world.
To discuss about the life and death problem, which is water. And that is not only life and death problem, it is the existential problem, and it is the economic problem, and it is the political problem.
Water diplomacy can be defined as the use of a diplomatic instruments to existing or emerging disagreements and conflicts over shared water resources with the aim to solve or mitigate those for the sake of cooperation, regional stability, and peace. And definition itself already contains all the challenges that we might be facing in the future. So that simple definition is actually prompting us to understand that this might seriously be a very serious issue. Can we show now here a global awareness and global consciousness? Can we address this together and make sure that the planet is a safe, shared place for everyone, and understand how can we address this with all our technology or with all our commitment, and of course, with all our solidarity? We are not ready to deal with the different patterns of getting water, which means that wetter areas of this planet Earth are getting wetter and drier areas are getting drier. What can the water diplomacy deliver? How much hope we can have?
I remember that as young children, we could swim in the river. Eels grew there or other fish for human consumption. In a cold winter, there were ice floes floating on this big river. But with the growing industrial, chemical, and pharmaceutical production along the river from the south up to the north, the pollution and the warming of the river grew. No fish, no ice floes, and no swimming in the river anymore. It took many years to prove that with transboundary cooperation and well-designed policies and investments and water diplomacy by the riverine countries and the industrial countries and investments by the industrial companies, it has been possible and continues to be possible to make changes and contribute to eco-civilization. It is a difficult and complex journey to move from recommendations and recipes to concrete actions, implementing the 17 goals of the 2030 agenda. I can only state here that we have to actively continue building bridges over troubled waters and really working towards the SDG 2030, in particular with these 3 goals. It's still a very long road ahead of us in meeting the targets of this goal number 5, with a lot of personal commitment and passion, listening to local voices and lessons learned, reflecting indigenous knowledge and the political will to make well-balanced changes as described in the 2030 agenda, we can jointly move on to pave the way towards a spiritual transformation for conscious water businesses, the theme of our talk and our discussion today.
My parents taught me the meanings of being a Hashemite and direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Do respect water. From water, we made everything alive. Do not waste water, do not pollute it, do not disturb its journey through nature. And the value of women as the source of life like water. Through the career, I always deal with water. And through the years, water continued with me through my coffee paintings, and more through the difficult time, go beside water or listen to water, and even tell my story to water. My life journey has been full of challenges, but the sound of water has always been that sound of peace, vision, imagination, innovation, strength, and much more, of loving and giving unconditionally. We gave a pledge to contribute to the United Nations Water for Sustainable Development Action Decade through science, technology, innovation, equity, and inclusion without leaving anyone behind. Science, like water, represents equality. To find sustainable solutions for the water problems worldwide, we must consider understanding the cultural dimension and social aspects of water and recognize its fundamental role in society's life, prosperity, and development. With water, the journey of a humanity started. Water, every human's right, is the biggest challenge facing a humanity. If you look closely to water, if you know the role of water in social and economic development, if you learn to appreciate the beauty of water and how to live and with harmony and respect for fellow humans and nature, if you understand that water is the source of life like women, then you will value water, equality, and its results, peace and prosperity for all. Jiangsu Global is a program that promotes the development, incubation, sharing, and application of science, technology, and innovation in the water domain. It is built on the understanding that transdisciplinary science and research that looks at the development issues holistically and through a water lens is a main driver for sustainable and equitable development without leaving anyone behind. If everyone will look within him or herself and see where they have a personal connection with water, then we will know how to value and respect water. We will know how to appreciate peace, the people, and the planet. And we will know then how we will deploy science and innovation to tell us how to revive peace, to tell us how to improve our lives. We will then learn and teach how to be grateful for the source of life and not destroy it with the human greed and power, desires, and weapons. We will leave something for our children and grandchildren to live with and from. With water, the journey of peace is starting from today. Let's hope for peace for everyone. Peace for everyone.
So my world, as you mentioned, is generally the world of transboundary waters. We have 311 basins around the world, and it's about half the land surface of the earth, and another 700 aquifers that cross borders. And in that experience, what's interesting is who's interested in this world of shared waters. If you look at the kind of global level, what you'll find is that the security people, the intelligence people, the people who focus on war and peace are generally focused on the conflict dimension, the conflict aspect. Conversation has shifted gently over the last decades from only thinking about the potential for water wars to now, how do we use water as a vehicle for dialogue and for peace building? Having the chance to sit with spiritual traditions, with faith traditions around the world to try to understand from within those contexts, how do we understand conflict? How do we understand transformation? And learning that so much of the process is much more around how do we sit? How do we honor each other? How do we learn to listen, not with our ears, but from the heart? some of the wealth of experience comes out, I think, in a framework for dialogue where people start with their positions, with what they want, with what they feel they deserve. And behind that are the interests, the why they are where they are. But deeper than that are their shared values and the potential for harmony. The deeper we get in exploring our shared values, the more our distinctions dissipate. So the way it was explained to me is that the basic level at Sharia, we're taught what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. The deeper level at Tariqah, we're taught what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours. And if we go further into the level of hakika, of truth, we realize there is no mine and there is no yours. And finally, at marifah, the level of attunement, we understand that there is no me and there is no you. What does this have to do with water? Similarly, there are four types of water. We talk about physical water that we move, that we see, that we touch. We talk about mental water, the water that we calculate, the water where we fix a price and think about efficiencies, but also the emotional water, water tied to sovereignty and to power and to history. And finally, spiritual water, water that is connected to spiritual transformation in all of our traditions. And I think as in water diplomacy, certainly in the West, we're so good at focusing on the physical and the mental, but the actual roots of the conflict may be in the emotional and the spiritual. The lesson, the key lesson, is to recognize the unified approach that we need to take, understanding all four of our prisms, all four of our understandings, whether it's about our relationship to each other, or certainly our relationship to water. All things in the natural world have a Maori, a life force, and a spiritual dimension. Respect for the spiritual integrity of the environment and God that created it will ensure that the treasure can be protected and passed on to succeeding generations.
One of the issues I sometimes think is that as water experts, maybe we sometimes talk too much to one another and not enough to actually the other sectors where I think we should talk more to. This is a survey that is done every year by the World Economic Forum, and it tells a little bit about the different risks that are there. And I would like to point out two things here. One is that if you look at the green items marked in this sheet, you see that they're all environmentally related. And also water is in there. So the natural resources crisis, that is the water and food crises put together. And you see that 5 out of those 10 top risks that are perceived by people coming from all different parts of society are perceived as say, coming from the environmental side and being the 10 top risks that are there. If we would like to achieve those sustainable development goals, we should start with water. If we don't manage to get water in order, it will become really, really difficult to also address all the other statements. I do think that talking about water diplomacy and talking about treaties, I think there is more and more emphasis also about good quality water in those treaties. And if you want to do that, you need capacity and you need to develop that, both in people, but also in institutions. So it's also about developing capacity in the governance system that's in place, but also institutions in the country together with the capacity in the people. And I think that's also a little bit what and why I'm so happy to be member and participating in this webinar. It's about creating capacity, building understanding together, and how in the development framework that's set up by UN Water, there are 2 different parts in there. One part starts with actually countries identifying their water and sanitation capacity gaps. And that comes from the status that now we have good international agreements where we would like to go. But actually, if you really want to make a difference, you should look at the national level or maybe even below the national level. So it's quite important to determine together, okay, we have those international agreements. Well, what can we do and what should we do now at the national level? And then based on that, you have to implement and you have to start making changes in there. You should look at water in a broad sense, not only from the physical side, but also look at all the other sides that water has, and because that determines the value of water, and that will help to appreciate water much better than we're doing at the moment. We are not going to be able to do this ourselves. I think it's something we need to do together. We hope that with this experience that is coming from all parts of the world, and I think it brings together quite some different cultures and knowledge. I think it can be broader. I think there's still a lot of other knowledge within the world. So I would very much welcome to connect those networks as well. If we continue using the science and what we know already to solve the problems of the future, then we will never be there.
Are we indeed running out of this incredible resource?
There's not currently the same amount of water that there has been throughout history. The amount doesn't change. What changes is our demand as our populations and our economies grow. And as Dr. 𝔼𝕔𝕚𝕚 mentioned, we lose a lot through pollution and through making it unusable in other ways. There is no away any longer. We need to protect what we have and recognize that it really is all that we have.
I think we have been able to solve some of the problems, but we have created new one and bigger ones. And I think that's what and where our challenge is.
How do we make our lawmakers listen with their hearts? People
like yourself, you make the difference. I think that's where it starts with, and I'm also quite happy with the younger people that stand up. But I think that's where it starts.
Let's not just talk science. Let's talk about the stuff that separates us, our deeper humanity stuff, right? Because the science we're good with at the moment. I'm not saying we don't focus this, like you mentioned earlier, but maybe turn our focus towards inward.
We saw years ago, water started to become a commodity item. So I wonder, can you see or foresee any global actions that could lead towards sort of not allowing acts like that?
I think water is the gift of God. You see, water is free. And who owns water? We own water. You see, every drop that falls from the sky to Violeta's house, okay, it's yours. But in India, it is not. It is state. So that you are not allowed to collect the water coming on your roof, and not in America. Okay, so then there are, ideological struggle, and there is another thing called service. So water is free. They said we took money for service. So it is a debate going on along, and you know who wins? Money speaks louder. We may not see the fruit of what we are doing now, but it is the reason that we should continue.
There is enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. If we live in the most forward, in an era where the most forward-thinking companies are taking our lives and selling it back to us, and we human beings are still quiet about it, we need to be heard.
It's time to use the conscious leadership in order to manage water better, to address the water issues and to engage in water diplomacy in a way. Close partnerships are necessary. Close partnership within the holistic circles, within the holistic ecosystems. And through that, honoring not only the future, but also the past, honoring all these physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual levels of water, and understand that this is a subject that needs to be addressed through spirit and heart if we really want to make it sustainable. I'd really like every citizen of this world to have a right for clean water.